Welcome back to another episode of The Spirit Inside. First, right off the bat, like, share, and subscribe if you would. That would help me a lot and appreciate it. And in this episode, we're going to stick with the brand Ron Centenario. Just a quick reminder, Ron is just rum in Spanish. And the specific rum or Ron we're having today's episode is specifically called, let me sure I get to say this right. It's the 9 years Commemorativo. Close enough. And in that last video, there was a lot of history that I kind of left behind because I didn't want to just shoot it all out in one video. So in this video, we're going to go back and cover a 16-year gap that covers from the founding in 1960 Noise to 1985 when they came out with their first product. So if there's some history stuff here that seems like it's missing, it's hopefully in the 7-year one that came out before this video, or it's coming on in the next video for the next product I'm going to do for Ron Centenario. But just to give you a little bit of a recap, let's start here with that. Ron Centenario originally came from the Seagram company. It was started up in 1969, and that's when Seagram established Seagram de Costa Rica. Then it was rebranded to Centenario International in 2002. This is a company that went to the market with the first rum product in 1985. So, like I said, that means there's a 16-year gap from when the founding of Seagram in Seagram de Costa Rica until they launched in 1985. So the question is why, and that's what this video is going to cover. So to start off with is that Seagram wanted their new Seagram de Costa Rica product line to be just top tier. They weren't looking to look at a budget-friendly kind of thing. They just wanted to come in and just be the top best type of rum they could offer. So because of that, you gotta invest in productions, infrastructure, building out networks and relationships with local business people, and just getting all the networking done. So that takes time. So that's part of the reason why that'll explain part of that 16-year gap. Part of setting up their infrastructure and getting their equipment and everything they need was acquiring specifically barrels from Scotland. Barrels that were used in the past in Scottish whiskey making specifically. Not just Seagram, but Costa Rica as a country in general wasn't able to get permission to get a supply of barrels until about 1979. The thing to understand is that there are certain brands and liquor types that have they have really tight control about who can produce them and where they can produce them. So like a really easy example to understand is tequila. You can't legally sell something as tequila if it wasn't made in the state of tequila, probably with at least agave, and at least agave if not blue agave. But the really key thing is that it can't be made outside of the state of tequila. So even if you went to another part of Mexico in another state that wasn't tequila, you couldn't call it tequila even if it was made with the same ingredients. Another good example is champagne. You can only be called champagne if it's made and produced from the province and the region in France called Champagne. Even if the same ingredients and process, but you made it in Napa Valley, California, you can't call it champagne. Now, I don't want to get bogged down into the legal mechanisms of how they enforce that. I mean, obviously it starts with first laws in the host nations passing something about, this is what's going to be called tequila with these set of conditions, and we would call champagne under these set of conditions. Internationally, there's trade organizations that nations are a part of, and they enter an agreement. So let's say the United States found an illegal tequila producing company out somewhere, wherever, maybe like Arizona or something, just across the border from Mexico. They see that they could probably have some kind of agreement with Mexico to shut that down and to seize the product so it never makes it to market. Like I said, there's a whole probably mechanism of legal framework of that. I don't want to get bogged in that. Just to quickly understand, that's also how Scottish whiskey works too. You can't call it Scottish whiskey if you're making it outside of Scotland, which is probably why you have specifically, Jack Daniel's saying it's American whiskey, or Crown Royal is Canadian whiskey, and then Irish whiskey, and etc. Like Japanese also have their own whiskey market, but they can never call it Scottish whiskey, no matter how much they may reproduce the Scottish way of making whiskey, because it's not obviously from Scotland. So then the question is, what does that have to do with making rum in Costa Rica? Well, like I said, they needed the barrels as part of their process, and because of the whole control they have, they're not, the Scottish government and the Scottish companies that make Scottish whiskey, they're not very, they're not just gonna let barrels go out into the world. They want some kind of control, some kind of guarantee that they're not gonna be made to make Scottish whiskey outside of that. That's part of that whole control. So why couldn't they just, sell them barrels to this company or to Costa Rica? There had to be some kind of agreement where the Scottish government gave permission for Seagram and other companies in Costa Rica to make Scottish whiskey, but they knew they weren't going to make Scottish whiskey, that they really just wanted the barrels. So then why this whole complicated system? There are a few reasons why I think this is the way it is. One is just the system they have. They're not likely to create a whole new system just to sell the barrels, but they have some kind of mechanism for permission for making Scottish whiskey outside of Scotland, even though they know in the end that Ron Centenario and all these other companies from Costa Rica weren't actually going to make a whiskey and call it Scottish whiskey out of Costa Rica or anything like that. They knew they just wanted the barrels, but they weren't going to create a whole new system for control of that. So that's just the system they had. So as imperfect as it was, they made use of it. And then getting that permission probably took a while, out of negotiating and back and forth, so that added to the 16-year gap. But then the question is, why do they have to, at least in Seagram's case, settle on the previously used barrels in Scottish whiskey? Why couldn't they just go to the Americans and get maybe barrels that were used in making American whiskey, or go to Canada and get ones that are using Canadian whiskey? So as part of that 16-year gap, I'm guessing Seagram was doing a lot of experimentation, trying different recipes, different production methods, and for whatever reason, that's just what they decided, that they got the results they wanted for their rum by using barrels that had previously been used Scottish whiskey versus American whiskey. And then that's when they hit the roadblock of getting the barrels themselves in large enough quantities. Now I do want to get a note of warning about this. It was really hard to piece together multiple sources to sort of confirm and make sure all this is accurate. This is what I could just figure out, and I have to admit I couldn't find a lot of good multiple sources to confirm this, so I gave AI a shot to figure this out, and I gotta say I wasn't impressed. I mean, if you've been keeping up with the criticism of AI, one of them is that sometimes they just make shit up. To wit, I used Google's version of their AI. I don't know what it's called, Gemini or something like that. And yeah, I wasn't impressed because I would ask this about the permission with Scotland to get the barrels and why it was so convoluted and everything. And I asked the same question, but in reframe the phrasing, and kept asking it to see if I can get good, consistent information. Problem is that I would get a response and they'd have links to sources, and you click on those links and then it would take you to, in my case, another AI generated result, and the second AI generated result would have information in it that would directly contradict the first AI generated result. So yeah, not very useful, but it wasn't totally worthless. Between what little non-AI resources I was able to gather around, and even with the contradictory AI sources, and then my just personal experience of researching these now for a while, I think I've got a pretty good handle of what the situation is as far as Scotland getting the permission to make Scottish whiskey, even though they don't really allow it, and how that came to be with the whole barrel situation. So here's what I think it is. I'm going to break it down. Let's look at it from the life cycle of the barrel themselves. Not always, but a lot of times you'll get like a white American oak barrel that's used in whiskey production here in the States. So maybe Jack Daniel's has it. They'll get their barrels made. They'll treat it, which usually means charring it. It could be other things, but that's a common thing. They'll make their whiskey. Jack Daniel's produce whatever they do. They'll use it for how many times they feel like it's good, and then they decide they need a new barrel. They don't just chuck it into the landfill or just throw it away. It's a way to, I guess, make use of it, make profit, get something out of that. Because what happens is that there are companies, whiskey makers abroad, including Scotland, well, they want those barrels because for their product, they like the formerly used barrels that are used, bourbons and other products from America. So they'll get the barrels, and then they'll use it for however long. And not always. Sometimes maybe there'll be a Scottish whiskey maker that'll just start fresh too, and treat their barrels right from the start, and they're the first users of those barrels. But for some companies, they'll import those barrels from, like I said, America or maybe some other Canadian source. They'll use it, and then from there, they'll reach a point where they decide they don't want to use these barrels anymore. And again, it's an option to, instead of just throwing it away, to recoup some of their costs. And since they know there's a market for rum companies in Costa Rica that want to use those barrels, because they also like the idea of how their product comes up from using previously used barrels, they'll sell it to them. it's still a little bit unclear, like I said, why they can't just directly sell the barrels directly to the Costa Rican market so they can make their rums. I mean, they know they're not going to compete with them directly as far as making another whiskey. I do find the whole situation where any company, any point in that life cycle, one company is willing to sell off their barrels to another liquor producing company, especially if it's another whiskey type of company, but even if it's just another liquor company altogether, like from Scottish whiskey company selling it to rum makers in Costa Rica. Just because you have consumers, they only have so much cash at any one time in their hand. If you're in a way, you're kind of helping them, because obviously if they never bothered selling the barrels to them, then that's one less competitor. But I think they do the math and they work together and they just work it out that, okay, it's going to maybe help out a competitor to some degree, but it's better just to recoup the cost on those barrels. That's the part of why I think that's the way it is. Well, like I said, I think the main thing is why they give permission to make Scottish whiskey out of Scotland is because that's just the system they have, instead of just selling the barrels directly. And the Scottish whiskey makers and the Scottish government, they know when they let the barrels exit the country to go to Costa Rica that they're not going to be made directly making any kind of whiskey, let alone a Scottish whiskey that's going to be made rum. So it's still a bit of a competitor because you're competing for consumers' dollars, but it's not a direct competitor. Another thing to consider, and this is a little bit speculative, but like I said, if they're giving permission to use the barrel, it was permission to create Scottish whiskey outside of Scotland, that probably has cost, fee, some kind of transaction of some kind of money. And it's probably more valuable to give out permission to create Scottish whiskey out of whiskey than if they were to just sell the barrels directly. I mean, if you're just selling barrels, then you're just talking about a pallet or a collection of barrels and they have a monetary value and that's it. But if you're also selling that bundled with permission to make Scottish whiskey, then it technically adds a little more value, which means you can charge a little bit more. That's what I'm thinking. No for sure, but I would assume that as part of it is that it's also a way to just generate a little bit more income. So if they're using this whole system of giving permission to use the barrels outside of Scotland and Costa Rica to make rum, it still helps them make control of their product and make sure the quality is high, because they know they're selling permission to make Scottish whiskey to a region that's not going to even make that. They just want the barrels, and then since they're selling it bundled with the permission, it creates higher value for them. So they go through that whole process, and in 1979 the first supply of barrels enters Costa Rica. Seagram gets not all of them, but a larger share than I think most other competitors, just because they're buying power. And in 1981 they put in their first batch of rum to age, which would be introduced to the public in 1985. So that means that first 1985 batch was aged anywhere between 3 and 4 years old. It's a little hard to pin down the exact date, unfortunately. The exact date when the rum entered the barrels was, let me double check here, September of 1981. And the first product came out in 1985. And for the life of me, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find an exact date in 1985 when the rum came available for purchase. But if you're looking at September of 1981 and then sometime in 1985, you're looking about 3 and 4 years, probably closer to 3 years, I'm guessing, but somewhere around there. So like I said, it's very weird that I couldn't find the exact date in 1985 when the product hit the market. If somebody out there knows, let me know in the comments. I've tried so many times. It's like there's no one who was alive back then or any kind of recorded memory that somehow didn't make it on the internet, which is kind of unusual in this day and age. So that's a little bit of history that fills in that 16-year gap. So let's get into a little bit more specific information about today's product here, the 9-year Commemorativo. This is a 40% alcohol per volume, which puts it at 80 proof. It is of course aged in American white oak barrels that have been used previously in Scottish whiskey production. And it's a blend of aged rums. So if you watched my previous video with the Ron Centenario 7-year Añejo special, had questions about what exactly that meant, there'll be a link in the description below to sort of review that if you want to. What I've learned since that last video and still doing a little bit more research is I was able to answer my own question about that. Basically, if it's a 9-year or 7-year or whatever the case might be, is they'll take a little bit from multiple barrel batches of the same year and just blend it all together, and that's what ends up in your bottle. Also, it's distilled from molasses, which I assume it still means that it's 100% sugarcane, since that's kind of an important ingredient of rum making. And obviously you can tell by the name it's aged 9 years. But the name behind that is a little bit more complicated than it seems. So much like the previous 7-year Añejo Special, the name and the label behind it is a little bit more complex and not straightforward. In 1994, Seagram wanted to celebrate almost a decade of rum making, so they created a product called, let me see if I get this right, Centenario Commemorativo. So you would think that's the exact same thing as today, because the name is pretty much the same. Sort of, maybe, probably not. See, while researching today's product, I came across a lot of information. Another one of those AI things kind of just popped up on its own, and it started blabbing on about the 9 meaning 9 grades, 9 grados. So this is supposed to mean that the distillery is on running along the 9th parallel above the equator. And that was at first only source that I could find, so I just ignored it because it seemed like AI nonsense. But as I do more research, I started to take a closer look at the official website of Ron Centenario themselves. And sure enough, they do have the Centenario 9 grados. So that means we have in 1994 Centenario Commemorativo. On the website we have the 9 grados, and then here we have the 9 years Commemorativo. So 3 similar-ish names. And the reason for part of that confusion is that in 2017, Ron Centenario decided they needed to refresh their image, and they meant a new logo, a new bottle, and label design. So on their official website, they do have the Commemorativo 9 grados. Now, much like the 7-year special that also got a name change to 7 provincias, I think it's the same product in the bottle, as far as at least between 9 grados and 9 years Commemorativo. I think after that 2017 refresh, there was just a slight name change, and they noticed about the 9-degree parallel of where the distillery is made, and so they made that slight little name change there. But it's still basically, I would assume, aside from maybe minor tweaks of the recipe or the production, it's the same product in the bottle as far as 9 grados and what we have here today, the 9-year Commemorativo. So then the question is, you get all these similar names across the years, how much alike are they? As far as the 1994 batch that came out, the Centenario Commemorativo, now obviously that 1994 batch is kind of long gone at this point. The question is, since the names are all similar, does that mean that the experience and the taste profile is similar? It's hard to say. I mean, I feel pretty sure that the taste profile and the taste experience between 9 grados and what we have here today is probably the same, since there's not that many years separating them and the names are similar, and it's really just that 2017 image refresh. But as far as that 1994 product and today, it could be, but there's a likelier chance that it's went through so many changes it's not really the same thing at all. That 2017 image change really made things confusing, really hard to sort of pin down as far as what I have here today and how it relates to what came out in 1994 and then what's on the website now. Like I said, the what's on the website now, the 9 grados, and what I have here today is probably the same thing. It's a shorter time gap, and it's probably just the 2017 image change. So it's pretty sure it's the same thing in the bottle. Between 1994 and what we have here today, though, I'm not as sure. So if you have some sources and you can confirm things one way or another, please let me know in the comments. That would be really helpful. Or better yet, help me grow this channel so I can be big enough so I can kind of get the attention of these companies. So I can just kind of ask them directly and help them clarify all these kind of confusing things. That'd be great. So like, share, and subscribe, of course. Now, this rum has won gold medals at the International Wine and Spirit Competition. It won in 2014, 2015, and 2016, and previously in 2011. But as we head into the review, I'm gonna have to repeat some information from my last video as far as about those rewards and how it reflects on the labeling part of the review. And so with that, yeah, let's head into the review. Let's get into the review here, and let's start like we always do with the packaging design. And then right from the start, I gotta sort of re-explain a little bit from my 7-year Ron Centenario video. It's about the graphic at the bottom. You'll notice these 5 awards from the ISW. Not to repeat everything from the last video, but the bottom line is this. Those 5 awards are legitimate awards that the Ron Centenario company brand has won, not necessarily for the specific bottle has won. So like I said, this particular product has won, awards from the wine and spirit competition over the years. This is ISW, different organization. As I give my final score, just to give you a heads up, that's gonna end up dinging a little bit, just because even though these are awards that Ron Centenario, the brand, has won, that doesn't mean these are the awards that this particular bottle, this particular product has won. So it's a little bit confusing, I think, for the consumer if they're paying attention to that. But if you want to know more detail about that, go ahead and watch my Centenario 7-year añejo special to get a little bit more depth in that. Also, a similar situation, I'm gonna give the score based on what's here in front of me. Like I said, this is an outdated labeling because now they switched it to 9 grados instead of 9 years Commemorativo. And much the similar situation as with the 7-year añejo special. This is fine, but I like the new upgrade for the 9 grados. It's just better use of negative space. It's a little bit crowded here, but this is a fine label. It's classy enough. The green is really nice. It just kind of matches well with the color, amber color of the rum in the bottle. Good contrast with this gold trim. As far as the score, I'm going to give this a 4. Pretty solid, but I'm going to ding it a little bit for, like I said, the whole situation with the graphic labels there. So the last bottle I had didn't have one of those automatic stoppers, and I was expecting that. I've just broken the seal on this and try to pour it, and yeah, this has one of those automatic stoppers in it, so like barely nothing comes out at first. It's a real pain in the ass. I hate these things. I mean, I guess it saves your bottle if you accidentally knock it over so it doesn't all spill, but it's gonna ding it a little bit more now, so I'm gonna give that a 3.5 actually for the packaging. And then as far as the smell, let's see what that's like. It's got a really nice vanilla smell. It's got a more pronounced sweetness than the 7-year special that I tried in the last video. Yeah. Strong vanilla and a more pronounced sweetness. Something. It's got a little bit of that burny alcohol smell, but it's kind of pleasantly light and kind of tingly. It smells really good. I'm gonna give that 4.5. Because probably the only thing I can ding it is that I wish it was just a little bit more potent. Appearance wise, it's very attractive. It's very enticing, I should say. And in the bottle, it's obviously always a little bit more, depending on how much light you get on it, but it's a nice, really amber color. Like I always say, these kind of colors are always kind of tricky because it's a fine line between something that's appealing and something that looks like just pee in a bottle. This is nice. This has got a classy look in the bottle, and then with the green labeling to kind of contrast it. It looks really great. If you were to come across the shelf, I would definitely wouldn't be turned off by the look of it. And then if you also kind of look at it, pour it out. Again, it always depends on your lighting situation, but it always lightens up a little bit when you take it out of the bottle because maybe the bottle has some kind of tint on it. And this is also really appealing. It's a little bit lighter. Like I said, it's always a risk as far as looking at something good and enticing versus just a little shot of pee or whatever. But this got this really great amber, almost honey-like color to it. So yeah, that's awesome. I'm gonna give it actually a perfect 5. It's really, really nice looking. Okay, let's see how it tastes. Oh, it is very good. Yeah, let me get another sip here real quick. Very light vanilla taste. It's got a little bit more burn than the 7-year one, but it's still not. It's not overpowering. It's kind of hits the palate, and it kind of feels like a bursting, almost tingling kind of sensation. Sweetness is very mild. I guess it has a tiny bit of a honey taste. To me, it's not always consistent, but sometimes the sweetness comes more like of that honey type sweetness versus a general sugar type sweetness. Very good. I'm gonna give that a solid 4.5 too on the taste. And then the mouthfeel, it has a little bit of a life as far as that sticking to your palate and on the tongue, but it's not like super long, but it doesn't evaporate instantly. It gives you a little bit, it sits there for a while, and it's a pleasant experience. Wouldn't want to stay too much longer because just kind of wanted to hit it and then be ready for your next sip there, but overall it's pretty good. I'll show you some of the oils here. It's not over oily, but you can notice that. I'm gonna give that a 4.5 on the mouthfeel as well. And then that brings us to the buzz factor. And just I always like to remind people is that this score is a little bit different in that it's just, we're not measuring good or bad, it's just the level of, the alcohol level as far as, you know, how quickly it can get you a buzz. The lower score just means it's milder, not necessarily bad. Higher score just means it's a little bit more potent and also not necessarily good or bad. And yeah, this is another 4.5 for me because I mean, I ate before started filming, don't have an empty stomach. I've only had the sips, you've seen me on camera, nothing off camera. And this is already working into my system. And then the palate really hits you really quick and it's already causing me to slur my words. So yeah, good stuff. If you want, get a buzz, and especially quickly, and not sure how long it'll last. Seems like it's got some legs though. Definitely on the higher end. I'm gonna say that's also a 4.5. So after a little bit off-camera math, we come to a score of 4.42. Really good. It would have been a little bit higher, obviously, if the packaging score would have been better. Like I said, the automatic stopper thing, I just really don't like those, so I always ding any kind of company that would include those. And then, like I said, the whole thing, how they do their graphics with their awards, it's not necessarily outright lying or deceptive, but it's not the most clear and honest as it could be. If they were to change, you know, the stopper thing and the graphic thing with the awards, that also could have been at least the 4.5 or maybe even a 5. But still ended up with 4.42. Pretty solid score. So let's head into the mix section. All right, here in the mix section, I'm gonna show you how to make something called the Centenario Dark and Stormy. Starting with our ingredients, we're gonna need 2 ounces of the Ron Centenario 9 years Commemorativo, or if you get the current lineup, from the current lineup, it's the 9 Gravos. Like I said, I suspect it's the same product. And of course, you know, you can use any kind of rum. This is what we're using today. We're gonna need half an ounce of lime juice, and then 4 to 8 ounces of ginger beer. Now the reason why I think there's a range of that is because when we add this into our glass, most of the recipes I found just say top off with ginger beer. There's just one that I found that gave that kind of range, and I think that's why you can just kind of adjust to your preference. So if you not a big fan of the ginger beer taste, you can always kind of back off on it and put a bit less. But yeah, it's basically just to taste. We're also gonna need ice. I just don't have it here on camera because I don't want it melting while we prepare everything, but that's just going to go directly into the glass. Again, most mixes and recipes don't really say a specific ice as far as cubes or crushed. I'm going to be using crushed just because I have it handy and I've kind of been enjoying that lately. As far as equipment, no equipment per se really needed, just something to measure things out. We're going to be using a high glass. Now this is technically some kind of a beer mug. I meant to get a high glass to replace one that broke a while ago, but just kind of slipped my mind, but it'll work out. And then we got a stir, obviously. And that's it. Pretty simple, straightforward. So let's get to it. So our first step is just to take our highball glass and fill it with ice. There's the aforementioned ice here. See if I can make this without making too much of a mess. And I would imagine you can kind of adjust this to your taste. I don't overdo it, but there we go. Yeah, it worked out all right. So then we're gonna be adding in our rum and our lime juice. So we're gonna do the 2 ounces of the rum here. That's why I don't like these automatic stoppers, because it's drip, 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 and then all of a sudden it just goes. Okay, see? And that's why the cutting board there too, so I don't make too much of a mess on my background here. Okay, one way or another, we got 2 ounces of rum in there. Next, just the ½ ounce of the lime juice. Then the ginger beer. Like it says, 4 to 8 ounces, but basically we're just topping it off with whatever amount we really need. So this particular bottle is 6.8 fluid ounces. So I'm definitely between that range here. So we'll see if I need any more than what's in here. I don't think so. No, in my case, my glass 6.8 ounces was pretty spot on. Of course, just adjust to your taste and to your needs. The other thing to mention is that a lot of these mixes call for a lime wheel or a lime wedge. I never do for these videos just because I don't really see it as necessary, but you know, that's an option if you want to do that. But that's it. That is that simple. That's the Ron Centenario Dark and Stormy. So that's the mix section. Pretty simple drink. Not sure why they call it Dark and Stormy. Maybe interesting to investigate that for a different video. But for now, it's really warm where I'm at. I'm anxious to get a sip of this. So let's get into the review here of the aroma. Very light and refreshing. The ginger beer definitely takes dominance here. But I can lightly smell the rum. So a hint of that vanilla sweetness. Overall, pretty good. I'll give that a solid 4. And one reason why I'm doing a 4 instead of a 5 is just that it's not very upfront. It's got to really try to get the smell. And it's a nice smell, but it's a little bit on the weak side. But then appearance-wise, yeah, it looks fine. It doesn't turn into something that I wouldn't want to drink. It's a little bit cloudy, which for me, I always like being able to, for whatever reason, just to see what's in my drink. I don't get any nasty surprise, but yeah, it's fine. Give it a 4.5 on that. Okay, now for the most important part, the flavor. Yeah, very light and refreshing. Just what I need for today. It's very hot where I'm at. Got that spice of the ginger that hits the back of the throat. For me, this is really good. Again, the overall flavor isn't very strong, which is a shame because I like what's there. The only thing that might be bad is if it got more of an upfront taste or stronger taste, as if that spiciness would become too much. But overall, it's pretty good. I know with ginger beer, it's kind of, for a lot of people, it's take it or leave it. I like ginger beer. Not my favorite thing to drink, but I like it just fine. So I can see for some people, if you don't like that ginger beer flavor, that this probably wouldn't be as appealing, but I like it. I wish the flavor was stronger, but not necessarily making the spice part of the ginger too strong. So again, I'll give that a solid 4.5. And mouthfeel, especially for a warm day like where I'm filming at right now, it's perfect. It's very refreshing. It's very light. It goes really quick as far as the mouthfeel not staying too long. The spiciness lingers a little bit longer than everything else, so that, again, depending on what you feel about ginger beer, it could be a good or bad thing. Again, because I like the overall taste, I wish it would stay longer as long as the spice part didn't get also more amplified. Again, I'll give that a 4.5. Really good. Just a little bit more balanced with the ginger spice. But like I said in the actual mix section, that could also depend on how much ginger beer you put in. So maybe if I put a little bit less, that would have balanced it out. So that could be my bad, but overall, still pretty good. 4.5. It's a little bit hard to say what I should give this on the buzz factor. It definitely seems more chilled out as far as the intensity of the alcohol. I don't think these would get me as messed up and as buzzed out as just drinking it straight. It definitely seems milder as far as catching a buzz, something like this. This could be a good thing if you're trying to pace yourself. I would give this a 3, just kind of an average ability to give you a buzz. Sure, by the time I get down to the bottom of this and get into my system, that it's gonna do something, but then it's also got to interact with what I've been drinking so far. So it's not crazy strong as far as the buzz factor. So yeah, this is a 3 on that. So after a little bit more off-screen math, we got a score for the mix here as a 4.1, which is really solid. We're pretty much at the end here, much like the previous video. You know, we covered, between the two videos, most of the brand's history. There's still a few more things to have to talk about, but likely have one more bottle of their product, and we'll kind of see if I can get the last miscellaneous bit of historical information there. I would say between the two I've tasted so far, the 7-year Añejo Special was great, or I guess today now it's called the 7 Provincias, just to be accurate there. But I like this 9-year Commemorativo, or 9 Grados, or again, the 9 Grados more updated name. I get a little bit more. The taste profile and the smell profile is a little bit more to my liking. If you've tried these products, and especially today's product, let me know. Really appreciate some comments and other, if you have any other information about it that you can share in the comments, that'd be great. Just to get some interaction there. And yeah, that's pretty much do it. And like I said, I got another bottle of their the Ron Centenario. It's a 30-year, so I'm looking forward to that now. Maybe they get a little bit better the longer they age. So until the next time, enjoy the spirits inside responsibly.